Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of The Critics. I think we're on episode 15 here. My name is Vinay Raman, and I am the CEO of a company called Carmo. We take data and visualizations and show companies from that data how they can empathize more deeply with their people. But we've put together this podcast specifically for a purpose, and that is so we can show people how to be more consistent in their communications with their employees and their customers. And the whole point of this podcast is how do we take all these various perspectives that we learn as leaders so that we can be more effective in those communications with our employees and customers? Because guess what? At the end of the day, that's the lifeblood of every company, those employees and customers. So, a couple of housekeeping rules of how we run this podcast. Throughout the course of this, as the host, my job is to get you all to get some value out of this podcast in this hour that you're spending with us. So I'll be asking questions. I'll be looking for opinions and perspectives from you, the audience, because we had almost 300 people who signed up for this event. I'd love to make sure that you get your question answered, or the questions that you might come up with along the way answered. So first thing I'd like to ask of you if you're joining into this podcast is we've got people like Nadej, who's in France. We've got Lindsay, who is in Canada, and Nihaz right in my backyard here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I want to see where you're connecting in from. Please type into the comments what country, city, state, province, region that you're connecting in from. I'd like to see who we've got on board and where you're connecting in from. That said, I'd like to introduce the people that I've got on our panel here. These are people that just before the show, I introduced them for the first time, and I'll pat myself on the back here because I got three fantastic high energy people here with fantastic opinions, fantastic perspectives on how to be more effective as leaders. I want to start first. I'm going to read a little bit about Nadej. Nadej, how you doing first?
I'm doing great. I'm really looking forward to this live. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to this. I want to give you a little bit of a background about Nadej and who she is. Born and raised in France, got a PhD in biology. She moved to live and work in 4 different other countries. But this is the thing I liked about Nadej, and part of why I invited here today is working and interacting with people from very different backgrounds. Nadej experienced how difficult it is for very different people to understand each other and work well together. Nadej, tell me a little more about that story. You've worked in so many different countries, different languages, different backgrounds, ethnicities, technical capabilities. Tell me a little more about what that meant and why you do what you do.
Well, I do what I do because, yes, I've experienced firsthand going into these different countries, these different cultures with people from all over the world, which is not what I was used to when I was in France to begin with. And so I arrived first in the USA with all these people, and I realized myself that although I could understand the language, the words they were using, there were a lot of things that obviously I didn't. I could see in meetings or just when we were talking that people that couldn't understand each other because they were coming from different backgrounds. And that happened over and over as I was moving in different places, different universities, different countries, that I got very interested because come on, we must be able to do something about it. And so I do what I do, in short, because I want to each other.
Yeah. I think that's a first nugget of wisdom I think that was just dropped on this podcast is this idea that people come from different backgrounds, and even though they're saying the same language, they're not saying the same thing or understanding the same thing. And I think that might be a foundational piece of kind of the way the rest of this is. Meanwhile, I hear from Tayeb, I think I'm pronouncing that properly, from Saudi Arabia. Welcome. And James from Phoenix, James Tayeb, welcome. And anybody else who's listening in, I'd love to hear where you're connecting in from. I'm going to go next to Lindsay. Lindsay, I'm going to read. Hey, Lindsay, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm great. I'm excited.
Lindsay, I'm going to tell everyone a little bit about you from the bio that I have here, right? Lindsay Carly Kadatz is a speaker and business consultant focused on team behavior via culture and brand alignment. Using a neuroscience approach, she supports leaders who want to have a positive, immediate, and lasting impact on their people, combining brand, mindset, process to transform values into action that matter. I love a lot of the language there. Tell me in practical terms, kind of where, when you go talk with somebody, they're trying to get something done. They're trying to get a message across. And this kind of touches back to what Nadej was saying, but the message is not hitting home. That's kind of what you do. Tell me more about that.
Mm-hmm. So ultimately, when I look, so businesses are people, plain and simple, how I look at them. And when we look at teams, we can see a team as a neural circuit. Neural circuits connect in different ways. Now, how is that team then operating at its most optimal self? And if there's not proper communication, if they don't understand how each individual operates within the system, if they don't understand the common language of the system itself, then the team itself cannot connect. It cannot produce. People do not understand why they're there on that team or why somebody else is there on that team. And so it's really taking this approach of looking at the business as a person and bringing it down to that more biology standpoint of, well, if this company is to thrive, then all these different teams are these different neural circuits that need to connect and interact together. How are they going to do that in the right way? And then from there, it becomes about how are we reinforcing the right behaviors the right way based on the individuals that we have here. How do they communicate? What is important to them? How do they understand their place in this world even, or even into this network of individuals that they're a part of? So that's really what I do, is help them speak better.
So what I'm hearing here, and kind of sort of building on that foundation that Nadej has already talked about, this idea of, hey, we don't necessarily understand each other, but if we've got alignment, it makes it easier and more effective. I don't want to say efficient, more effective in our ability to understand each other. And that's kind of what you help do, is bring people into alignment, because then you spend less time with noise and more time making the signal to noise ratio is higher, more high quality sound that's coming out. Did I get that right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Let's see. We also have T. Rahul Rajan, who joined in from India, Santosh Kumar from India, Ankush and Prim from Kenya and India, and Ankush Niha, he says he likes your white puffy seat cover. It's awesome. Niha, I don't know if you knew, but that's what people are already seeing about you, that you've got fantastic taste in seat covers.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for commenting on the seat cover. I thought it was fun. And part of the work that I think that we are all talking about is when humans are coming together, we are essentially driven by purpose and by fun. And of course, we want to create a lot of safety. And so when we feel safe and we're having a lot of fun, we are ultimately going to create a lot more success. And so I've loved having these conversations already with the experts on the panel, and having lots of conversations with you, Vinay. And I think that it's just really, really critical. And one of the other things that we were all adding as we were getting to know each other is how important it is for us to have a place where people feel safe to connect as humans in their truest authenticity. So there's a lot out there about, well, we have to look really polished and we have to look really professional. But we are talking here in this group, what I'm hearing about people coming in to show up in their best expertise, where they feel safe and connected, so that you're creating better connectivity and pathways for better success in an enjoyable way. And I think when you make sure that people from all perspectives can come in and have a common way of speaking, where we understand what we're trying to say, you're going to get to that better result, a better solution faster than you could without those bridges. So that's what I heard so far. And that's what I think is important.
And let me do one thing, because I do want to make sure, Neha, everybody understands a little bit about who you are. So I'm going to read a little bit about you as well. And then I want to kind of open up and answer an open-ended question here that I'd like to throw out to you all. Neha is a leadership and executive coach for women of color and female leaders who want to create a balanced, joyful success and bold strategic action. She teaches modern, inclusive leadership skills so her clients rise through the ranks with ease and take place alongside the most important decision makers. Thank you, all three of you, for being here today. And anybody who's listening in, hopefully you're already starting to see we're getting nuggets here about this idea of how to build efficient communicate, not just efficient, but effective. I think of efficient as just kind of turning that wheel again and again and again. Effective is I say it one time and everybody gets it. And I think that resonates with what Nadej is saying. Doesn't matter what background you're from, you get the message. What Lindsay is saying in terms of if we create this alignment, everybody gets the message. And then your intentionality, your potency as a leader starts to rise, to your point, Neha, right? I'd like to ask anybody who's listening in, what are the nuggets that you've already learned? Or are there any things that you're hearing here that you agree, disagree, want some more clarity on? Please put that into the comments. It seems like we continue to get more people who are listening in. Kendall from Tampa, Florida, and Wanda from New York in United States. Hello to all of you, and thank you for joining us. So please type that into the comments. I'd love to hear what you're hearing already and what you think is what's resonating with you. I want to ask an open-ended question here, sort of for my panel here. The topic of this podcast is how to be consistent in your communications with employees and customers. I think we've built some foundational elements already. Neha, you went last. When I suggested that topic to you, what went through your mind when you heard that?
I first thought about how essential driving a strategic plan from something we were discussing earlier today through your values is going to keep the right people that are doing the right things in closer alignment to the end result. So when we talk about creating clarity of vision through communication, the most potent way of doing that is to organize and connect around shared and common values. And so that might mean that there's like a top 3 drivers, but in some way for us, that has to at least be in the top like 7 to 10. And then we can come and create a well-balanced, stronger organization that represent other really important values when we at least have the commonality of the 3 strongest directives strategically. And then we have a value-driven organization that's attracting and compelling people with similar values and other ones that strengthen all the areas so that we get to what we're wanting to go.
So let me distill a little bit of what I've just heard from you. And this is an analogy I use a lot. And I think this is what I'm hearing from you again, or in your words, right? I think about a 300-watt light bulb. It's a really powerful light bulb that you use in stadiums and big places. 300 watts is a lot of power, puts off a lot of heat. But a 300-watt laser has got this pinpoint accuracy, but it'll burn through sheet steel. It's so incredibly powerful because it's got that laser focus. And it's not about being the 300-watt light bulb that throws light all over the place. It's getting everybody to that laser focus because you're so powerfully combined and aligned. Lindsay, I want to kind of throw that over to you, kind of sort of dovetail for me these two things. What did you first think about when we talked about this topic and this idea of this light bulb versus this laser? Does that kind of mesh with how you think?
So I'm excited about that analogy you just shared. The first thought I had when I saw this topic was yes, because if our employees do not know who we are, if they do not know what we stand for, if they don't know what the values in action look like, and there's not stories to back that up, and they can't understand what that is beyond a beautiful, fluffy marketing statement, you're going to have a breakdown in communication with all clients because there won't be any consistency. So what I love about this light bulb versus laser is that when we have this clarity on what those values are, both in definition, not in definition, but in definition, and in the actions, and particularly ownership over those actions within your own role. So not just what does it look like in the company, but what does it look like for you in your role? You can then all come together and understand, how do we make this laser go forward? Really powerful, really strong, and not burn out. So that's really what came to my mind with that beautiful visual that you had, is ownership of action then creates more consistency in application for people to then outwardly understand.
Thank you for sharing that. And Deja, I want to come to you in 1 second, but we've got more people who kind of chiming into the comments. Thank you so much. From Rahul, he said, Neha, I really appreciate what you have said. Thank you for sharing that, Rahul. Matthew Kniffen from Fresno, California. I hope I said that properly. And Jay joining from Houston, Texas. Welcome. I'd love to hear, as you're going through this, please share what are the nuggets that you're hearing, because I don't know that I'm fast enough to keep up with all the things that we're getting from our August panel here. So I would love to hear in the comments what you all are seeing and what you're hearing that is kind of resonating with you. And if you want some more further clarity, please do type that in. Nadej, I want to come back to you. The topic, the title, this idea of the laser and the focus, being able to get everybody on that same sheet of music from different backgrounds. What went through your mind?
So it will sound very counterintuitive, but when I looked at the title and say how to be consistent, the first thing that came to my mind was inconsistency. Let me explain. It's that what I had in mind here is that you need to be consistent on the message, the meaning of the message you want to share with your employees or your customers. But the inconsistency part comes into how you deliver that message. And basically, each employee, each customer will need to have that same meaning delivered in a different way. So the message is consistent, the meaning is consistent, but to me, in my mind, there was this idea of inconsistency about how you deliver that message. And basically, to go to this idea of a beam to the laser is that, you have a kind of a beam because people are different and things like that. So they're kind of shining the light, different lights in every direction. So you have this huge beam. And what you do with your consistent meaning is that basically you take that beam and transform it into a laser. That was my idea. That's how I see the thing. So it's that to have a consistent meaning to your message, know what you want to say, what you want to, what you want to say to people, what you want them to understand, and then to find the way of saying it in the way that they will understand it the way you want.
I'm going to play that back to you, kind of what I heard, and this resonates with me so much because I used this example just earlier today. Even with my own time, just talking to my own team, I was talking about this idea that if I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, the East Coast of the United States. If I want to go to France, I want to travel to France. That immediately starts to rule out this idea of going on a scooter, a bicycle, a motorcycle, or a car, because I know what the destination is. If I understand that destination, everyone says, well, then I guess we're going to have to go by boat, or we're going to have to go by plane, because there's no other methods of transportation. There's no way to walk there either. And by creating that focus, what it does is it just starts to eliminate options. And all of a sudden, instead of being 15 different modes of transportation, all of a sudden we're trying to determine, depending on, regardless of background, we're already realizing that there's only one of two potential meanings here in terms of how we're going to get there. It starts to create focus and alignment faster. That's kind of what I was hearing from you. It's by being inconsistent saying what our destination is, it gives a lot of thinking work for others to do to understand what it is we're saying. Am I getting that right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
The couple of comments that came in here. Nirdesh said, missed the first 15 minutes. No problem, Nirdesh. Won't hold it against you. Just ask more questions and drop some nuggets in that you're hearing from the panelists. I'll consider you okay. James said, thoughts on utilizing the laser focus versus light bulb focus. Does this limit the potential for potential future growth, or from a communications focus perspective, still the best practice? Anybody want to take that? It's Lindsay. It seems like that might be kind of right up your alley in terms of talking from a marketing point of view. Is that a fair question for you?
So what came to I'm not sure it does limit. What I think is important, though, is to understand, because exactly to Neha's point, when we really know this focus, we're able to craft our message that attracts the people who are more attracted to us. And it doesn't mean that other companies are wrong in their values, even if they have that same value but very different definitions. It means that you pull in people who are more aligned with your vision. What I think is important, though, is that we still open ourselves up to listening and being able to, when someone has a question, and they're still aligned, but they may have sort of, again, we all come from different backgrounds, but they have a question, that we are open to understanding what their question is, even if it's in direct opposition to what this laser is. Because it may actually reinforce the laser and make it stronger because of this different viewpoint. It just may help to build on ideas as to how do we make this message stronger, this where we're going stronger. So I'm not sure it's necessarily limiting. I think the only thing that's limiting is if we're unwilling to let people ask questions, let people challenge, not if we're not willing to ask, well, who's not at this table, who should be at this table, to help us further this conversation.
So I want to jump in here because I'd like to transition a little bit of what we're doing here. And it's not that Neha and Nadej, you don't have good thoughts on the topic. I'd like to transition us a little bit because I'll tell you for my own self, I may be one of probably the only propeller heads left in the world that actually admits that they liked physics in high school. I absolutely loved physics, but I didn't like when they're writing on chalkboards. I think I just dated myself. I'm sorry, whiteboards, when they used to write on whiteboards, right? They used to write all the equations on the wall, but it wasn't until I actually got to crash the two billiard balls into each other where I started to understand how elastic and inelastic equations, what it really meant. I was like, oh, aha, I get it, because it's a practical application of that. The labs really helped me a lot. Here's why I'm telling you that, because the transition I'd like to make now is the title of this is consistent communications with employees and customers. I'd like to show you some graphs, what we call empathy graphs in my company, that shows you the situation or the context for an individual in a company. It's all based on real data. We've just changed the names. And the reason I want to show you that is because based on that, we're all trying to become more effective leaders. I think that's why everyone is here on this call. I'd love to hear from our panel in terms of what they're seeing, and also from those in the audience, what they're seeing, because I think if we have that consistency of message and alignment, we'll start to find that our ability to lift people that work in our organization starts to get not harder, it actually becomes more effective and efficient at the same time. All right. So I'm going to share my screen here in a second here, as soon as I get past my technology challenges, as always. Here you go. Can you all see my screen here?
Yep.
All right. This is our panel, and I'm going to bring you to something we call an employee scorecard. Let me walk you through this for everyone on the that's listening in, just what you're looking at here. So we've got this employee named Eric F, and the average person in a role that this Eric is also serving in, the average person in this company has got a 50. Eric has also got a 50. Look, I think as a leader, we always want our employees to produce at their highest level of capacity. And I'm going to bring you down to the graph here. The idea is that a highly effective employee would have this thing completely covered in blue. as in they're really, really good on all these different dimensions. I'll tell you the dimensions don't matter so much because they're all industry specific. This one happens to be for a pest control company, but it really can relate to any company where you've got KPIs or data or metrics. And what I'd like to turn this into is something where we can figure out how from this data, KPIs and these metrics, these key performance indicators, we can start to lead more effectively. So driver behaviors, how you drive the vehicle, the efficiency in their roles, the employee experience scores, how are they feeling in their role, their net promoter scores, their customer service experience scores, how aligned they are with their management, their skills assessment, their technical ability, and their tech referring. In this case, is their ability to refer jobs back in. This is one particular type of role. Again, this can apply for any type of role. We just had to pick one to start with. But by looking at this, we can see Eric has got a 50, which is pretty much right at average. But you can see that there's areas like efficiency and priority alignment where Eric is significantly better than the average, this dark gray. I think that changes the type of conversation that we have with Eric as opposed to another person, another employee at the same company, because Eric is unique in their background. So maybe I'll throw this out to you first, Nadej. Eric is different from everybody else. He's got his own set of unique needs. Being able to see this, let's talk to me about that consistency. How do we create that consistency by being able to understand Eric?
Very good question. Well, I think first that's very good to have such data because I think a good thing to do is really to try to play on people's strengths. And so I think you want to communicate to Eric on these strengths and basically try to use him in the team in a way that these strengths will be really used. So both for himself, but also for others, because here it's an average and he will be a lot better. So we can see that he is a lot better on efficiency, priority alignment than other people in the team. So basically communicate maybe about that, but also to see how he can communicate these to other people in the team, to basically bring people in a way up to speed or ensure that as a whole the team will function better, because it's communication is not just the leader's responsibility. So that would be my view.
So I heard a couple of things here. Number one is let's lean into some of those strengths because we know what Eric's strengths are. Naturally, he's performing well in this efficiency, right? So some technical capability seems to be good for Eric here, and whatever else role it could be. Their alignment with the leadership and understanding the priority that the leadership has put in place, that makes sense to Eric. This is an opportunity for Eric to not only articulate that to others in the team so that they can say, oh, I get it. The light bulb has gone off from greater alignment for all outside of just the leader doing it, but it actually plays to his natural strengths. Neha, I'd like to go to you next. Did you see things the same way as Nadej did? Do you have a different viewpoint? What's going through your mind?
Well, very similarly, I think, to the experts here is, first of all, I think about who are we bringing in? Who are we calling in? So a couple of things that came to mind, and I was taking some notes, of course, because I love that. I love data. I love notes. I love using data to streamline what we're doing, increase effectiveness. And what I'm noticing here is what did we know about Eric when we brought him on? And how do we want to use that information moving forward for who we are magnetizing into our organization? And do they reflect? Do they exemplify the most important priorities? Because here I think I counted like 7 KPIs, which is great. But what are the top 3 that we use as a critical filter when we're calling people in, when we're setting up job descriptions and job postings and when we're training people to bring them in. So when we bring people in that are in strong alignment with our values in the beginning, you are setting people up for being congruent with who they are with the organization. And then to Nadej's point of view earlier, and Lindsay also mentioned this, is how are we articulating the meaning of those values clearly so that on the onset, that web is more on target to begin with. When we see that it may or may not get off track, what are the blockers systematically? How are we investing and changing in the development of that person so that it's clear to them what's most important and where to prioritize first? Because we never want to use this kind of data and like overwhelm people. That person, Eric, as well as Eric's developer, the person that inspires Eric at the office, person that's there to invest and develop Eric, they have to focus on just one or two things. Otherwise, we're creating burnout. To Lindsay's point, we're going towards exhaustion. That's not what this is for. This is for alignment.
So this is a good jumping off point. And Lindsay, I want to come and hear what you have to say, because I'm sure you have some great thoughts here. I heard a couple of comments here, and I want to bring it back to the audience who's listening in. Jay said, thank you. And to the team, Jay also said, aware communicating with the client to be with sensing their pain, challenges, and their persona. So while we're talking about an employee here, I mean, I think this is using the same type of data and the same sort of visualizations to understand your customers. You can have that same level of effect where you're saying, I deeply understand and empathize my customer. How do I compassionately act as that leader, that boss, that developer, that value provider to them? Charles says, I call that a drill down in my office. And I think that was kind of the idea of breaking things down to different levels. And James said, Lindsay, he liked that response. Lindsay, what's going through your mind? We have this opportunity, let's say we look at this employee and we look at this and go, hey, this person is kind of like a C-level employee. I don't know, B, C, D or employee, somewhere in that frame. We now have this idea of, if we know where we're trying to go, these data points kind of tell us where we're trying to go, maybe to those critical points, decision-making factors that you're talking about, Neha. That kind of gives us the ability to shift how we have that conversation, change perspective in that conversation. Lindsay, thoughts?
Honestly, I don't think I have too much to add here, because it's very much about building to one's strengths. Why was Eric hired in the first place? And what is the career path? And maybe the company didn't have this, but when they hire people, do they then have a career path for them in the business? And so one other question I have is 50, is the average score okay for the company? Not to say 50 is not, maybe it is. So maybe he's right on par. And they're like, well, you know what? We actually don't have any issues with Eric. This is fine. He's at 50. But what then would be the ideal score that the leaders are then looking for? And in what areas are they looking for them specifically for Eric? Because that then would change for the others as well.
I'd love to hear from the audience. What are you seeing here? What kind of came to mind as kind of went through and explained this, as you heard Nadej, and Neha, and Lindsay talk through this? Are there any things that kind of stuck with you, sort of revelations, some take-home nuggets? And I want to start to kind of come back to what you were saying, Lindsay, because I think there's a fantastic point there, right? We're seeing here that this person has got his driver behavior because they drive a vehicle in this particular business, in this particular role, right? They drive a vehicle to service their customers. This person is highly efficient. We tend to gravitate to we tend to like the things that we gravitate to, that we do naturally well, right? So efficiency, technical capability is probably something that this person has a natural gift for, that they seem to like. And their alignment with their boss, understanding, why do I have to do this? And why does it matter for my business? They're aligned there. It almost seems like there's, to some degree, and I'm kind of suggesting this as a question, it seems like Eric's kind of starting to tell us, here's what I can do for you. Use me. Thoughts? I'll open up to all three of you. What anybody have a thought on that? And to that point of the score, right? What is the right score? if we're starting to see Eric has got some natural proclivities, some natural talents. Do we have him? Do we have that right button, the right seat?
I think it speaks to what Lindsay was saying so well is why was he hired and what is the career path? What is retention important to us, development and retention and engagement? And I love this idea of the power that comes from doubling down on your values, doubling down on what makes us different, which is great. Where are we headed? And when we know that Eric is really good in these areas, there's a natural propensity. Do we want to develop the areas where he doesn't, make it more clear so that he's balanced? Why or why not? And then in the future, where is he going to go? And how, what are we prioritizing here and why? So it allows you to make some really powerful and effective decisions.
Yeah. Lindsay, do you have a thought there?
Well, I mean, just do we really need to worry about tech preferring? Is the ultimate question then, is just because it's low, if it's not on his career path, if it's, do we need to waste time on that for him? I mean, that's not really.
So let's bring that back. I mean, again, title of the episode is how to be consistent in communications with employees and customers, right? By understanding kind of what sort of natural propensity or proclivities that they have, right? Because we're looking at the data here. Can we tune our consistency in communications with those employees or customers?
Yes, I think so.
Tell me more. What's going through your mind, Nadej?
Well, I think, as Lindsay and Neha have already said, basically, and all of us have agreed, it's to play on people's strengths. And we talked also about, the score is 50 okay, or should it be higher? But whatever the score, what you don't want to have in your organization is to look at each employee, and each employee on all these various KPIs are very close to the average. Because here you've got an extremely homogeneous group. Then you want actually that kind of graphs where you see some employees will be much better on some KPIs than others. And so, yes, because, they will have different positions, so different skills are required. After, of course, there's a question of, are they in the right position given the skills they show on the data? Should we move them to something else? We've talked about career paths. And so I think it's towards that the communication to each and every employee should focus on.
So I want to shift things up a little bit here. I want to actually show another slide which has got a graph for another person, because it kind of gives you a perspective in terms of everybody doesn't look exactly the same. I do want to lean into, James, you had asked a question around that laser focus versus light bulb focus. Does it limit the potential for future growth? I would love to hear. I'm a little dated here in my question, but I'd love to hear if you kind of got an answer that kind of gave you some clarity there. And I would, again, love to hear from the audience what they're picking up here. Are you just flat out disagreeing with everything we're saying, loving everything you're saying? Let me know. I would love to hear what you're seeing, and do you feel like we're doing good service to that title of the episode? All right, let me go to another graph. Different person, right? Amador. You can see that this graph here, he's got a 49 versus a 50, but these are two different people. Is that what you all are seeing as well? Neha, Lindsay, Nadej, I'm curious what's going through your mind as you look at this graph. What occurs to you?
I think it highlights, and Nadej, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it does highlight a piece of what you were saying, in that this individual very clearly has different strengths than Eric F. effectiveness, right?
Absolutely.
So that allows for a more rounded overall team, even though they all have a similar median score.
Let me read this comment from Charles that just popped up here. Charles, thanks for typing this in. He says it's important to know how know your employees' goals / expectations. Do those goals match the company? Using KPIs can help bridge a gap in the processes. I think what I'm hearing Charles say is, by seeing this, I can start to find where the blind, I mean, we call the name of the media company that we use to run all the critics is called Business Blind Spots Media. I think, Charles, you're starting to say, hey, look, by seeing this about your employees with the graphs like this that we create for companies, you can start to find out where those gaps are and start to use that as sort of the superpower for each person in your company. Lindsay, did I cut you off when you were saying something there? Is that what you were kind of saying?
No, I mean, yes, no, you did not cut me off. Yes, yeah, absolutely. That's what I was saying, because if you are having a team with these similar strengths, then you know where you need to hire out. You know what specific skills you need to hire out. And if you know what those values are in clear definition and what they stand for, you can work that into the job description that you're trying to hire. So it's not just about the skills, it's about the individual and what drives them, so that you have a more blended individual who can come into this team, fill that gap of skill, and contribute to that laser focus.
So I want to take a little bit of what Charles said here, right? I mean, if we start to find out that, I think we saw the last, Eric wasn't so strong at tech referring, but we see Amador actually is clearly leaning into his strength here. Neha, I want to pose a question to you. As an effective leader, becoming an effective leader, is there any value in taking this idea of saying, hey, Amador, you're not so good at efficiency. Let me put you in touch with Eric. And by the way, Eric, I think you should sit down with Amador. That kind of takes some weight off my shoulders as a leader, because the two of them are kind of, I mean, and I actually didn't plan it this way. These two are actually kind of nice compliments to each other, right? Neha, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. And to the point that both Lindsay and Nadej have just made, and to yours as well, Vinay, it's like now you're coming to a nice place to work where people are looking out for you, and kind of focusing on as a peer-to-peer development. And that kind of safety of retention, like why people want to come into a culture and an organization, particularly when I am doing hiring, is that people are oftentimes saying, when I ask the question, what kind of an organization do you thrive? What's important to you? And essentially is what I'm asking. And 9 times out of 10, it always leads with, I can ask somebody a question and get some support. And I'm like, well, that's lucky, because I like to create and build organizations and cultures where that's exactly what's happening. That you can feel safe, ask a question, and get support, because you don't always want to be going to the principal's office to get the heavy weigh-in. You kind of want to go to your peer and feel like they're covering you and you're covering them.
We have an organization that we work with. When they first started using these graphs, I heard a statistic that was a pretty staggering number, and that number was that the average manager or leader in a company spends about 20 hours of their week managing and collecting data, gathering data, so that they can understand what's happening with their people. One of the companies we work with, they said that numbers moved down to 2 to 3 hours a week. And what are they doing with that extra 17 to 18 hours a week? Is they're spending time with them, talking them through things, building alignment, understanding what their strengths are. Is that a more effective organization? You're damn skippy, right? They are spending time getting more velocity and speed and being more effective. Lindsay, Nadej, what's going through your minds? What are we not talking about here with regards to that consistency of communication? Or is there anything that we're missing?
No, I think I think we've covered already quite a bit. And to come back to Charles' comment, what I would say is that ideally, you'd like to know someone's goals and expectations before hiring them. And so it's before you decide to hire them that it would be good to see if there will be a good match for the company. And a lot of people try to do that anyway during an interview and the hiring process. So that gives you a kind of baseline. But I think where these KPIs also come into play is that, well, our goals, our expectations, they evolve. They're not always the same all our life. And so these KPIs basically kind of allow you to check that evolution and to see if there's still a match. And it's there basically that then you can bridge the gap when there's a change or when you see a mismatch happening between the goals and expectations of the individual and the goals, the culture or whatever of the company.
Yeah, absolutely. We evolve as creatures over time because, I'll tell you, when I was a single person, I was willing to work 85 hours a week, and because my life, my social culture revolves around work and happy hours with people from work. And then I get married and have kids, and I was not showing up at happy hours anymore. The things that matter to me in life changed, and I suspect that I'm not the only person that's happened to. Right. So I think, Nadej, your point is being able to see kind of where their strengths are, where they're natural. I always talk about this idea of, Superman, Superwoman is always tearing open their shirt to expose the Superman suit underneath, right? The superhero suit. That is what I believe a leader, if you can help them tear off that cover shirt and have the Superman or Superwoman shirt underneath, expose those superheroes within the organization. There's real power as a leader in doing that. Lindsay, you're nodding your head. Some thoughts?
So many. So many wheels are turning right now. But I want to build on what Neha was saying, because it's really about the topic is consistency of communications. And what I love is that peer-to-peer support, recognizing who has strength where, how can we support one another, who can we go to, and take that off the leader plate because they're busy. Let's face it, right? So the question then, not even necessarily the question, but the thought is the leader then being able to communicate clearly their expectations on how this peer-to-peer support can happen, and make sure that there's that consistency of message, consistency in execution of almost peer-to-peer coaching, so that we don't just become this, I'm not going to say this right, homogeneous group of individuals, but that we carry that peer-to-peer coaching forward in the same message, but we're still, there's a thought there, it's just gone. But it's very much about how are we supporting the leaders carry the message throughout the company, rather than just, oh, I need some support in this area, can you come and support me in this area? Is there that consistency in language and how the leader would share growing a certain behavior versus how a peer would?
And if we translate this into, these people are all customer facing, right? If they all understand that culture, those beliefs, those core values, a lot of people put those 5 words up on the wall and that's the last time they ever talk about it, right? But if each one of these employees are talking about it amongst themselves, that's also the language that they're going to choose in speaking with customers. So building that consistency of communications, whether they're a telemarketing representative, a call center representative, or a person out in the field seeing them, account manager, whatever the case may be, that if there's that internal feeling, they understand kind of why it is that they're doing things, that consistency will be established throughout the course of this process.
So then, sorry. So then would the company, or does the lead, would it not drive the company then to make sure that there's a collection of stories highlighting how each behavior is exemplified in action, so that they can just have this collections of stories? Well, this is how we do it, and this is where we can grow. This is why this succeeds this way. This is why this is the value. Does that not then support how there's that greater consistency in communications and in how things are done?
2 comments here I want to kind of call attention to. James said, definitely like Lindsay's thoughts on having the laser focus, but also being open to questions, thoughts, etc. Being open to questions and thoughts can also give you an understanding of the goals and growth for them individually, like Charles noted above regarding employees' thoughts and expectations. James, kind of summarizing a little what you said there, I think there's 2 ways that I learn about myself personally, what I am not and what I am. And sometimes what I am not is the best way to learn what I actually am. And Charles, thanks for your comments in the past. Those goals can change over time, so it is important to do frequent check-ins. Michael Byrne, hey, Michael, good to see you. Love to catch up with you as well. I will reach out. We're at 10 minutes before the hour. I want to stop sharing my screen here for a little bit because it seems these times and these conversations seem to go really pretty quickly. I want to distill a couple of nuggets that people can kind of take away. So I'd like to say, give me about 2 minutes of, give me 1, 2, or 3 distillations from what we talked about today in terms of building that consistency of communications with customers and or employees, right? Lindsay, start with you. Give me 2 minutes worth.
Oh my gosh, and go. Honestly, I love the idea that Nadej brings to the table of how do we make sure that we're all speaking that same language so that we can have that consistent conversation, because there is such a drive and an understanding that teams that are more diverse, when they understand one another and where each other is coming from, do tend to produce more, produce better. So for me, even in looking at the data, we can then start to see, well, where is that diversity? Where is that lack of diversity? Where might those miscommunications be? And why? So for me, I think that's one of the more powerful things that I've personally taken away, is that it's not about making sure that we're all on the same page. It's understanding how are we coming to that same page. What chapter are we actually starting at versus what chapter do we need to be at?
Yeah, I appreciate you summarizing there. I want to make an offer to everyone. If you liked some of these graphs and you want to be able to see how this was working within your organization, just type in visualization or actually type in graph into the comments, and I'll get you in touch with my team. We'll do one of these for you so you can just kind of see where your team is today and how each one of your employees or one of your customers, each one of your customers are doing. You can see these graphs. We'll create one for you for free just because you've joined this episode here. So just type in graph or visualization into the comments, and I'll get you in touch with my team, and they'll create one for you that's completely free of cost, complimentary. Nadej, I want to come back to you in a second. Neha, it looks like you were writing a bunch of notes there. Give me your 2-minute version, kind of nuggets of what people should take home from here.
Yeah, I think that really, like, distilling down, if you think about where do you want to be 5 years from now, or even 10. And that exercise is really important, not because we're trying to land on that 10 years from now with precision. That's not why we do that exercise. We do that exercise so that we can really transcend the day-to-day that keeps us out of the ability to think at a really high and powerful strategic level. And so when you stop for a moment and ask, where do I want to be 10 years from now, you can then access emotions and thinking that lead to that success in a more congruent and linear path. And that will allow you to do some of these things that Lindsay and Nadej were already talking about, where you say, who do I need at the table? How will I be attractive to them? What values do they have that also represent mine, and vice versa? And what I loved about what we all said today, particularly what Nadej kicked off on, is what is the meaning? Because we could say, I value, integrity, but it's the lived values. What does that mean? And I know Vinay and I have just recently been in a place where we talked about that, but it's like, that means if you're having a problem, you ask for help. If you're having a problem, you feel safe. Like, whatever that means, that you are describing in action how you will achieve that. And then reverse back and say, how am I bringing these individuals here? How am I supporting and investing in the culture to make sure that we are behaving? So lived values means that you're behaving in a certain way because you're more congruent in the application and the understanding of what our goals are and the meaning. Because I know I can be in spaces where people are, for the longest time, I think I'm just figuring out what table stakes means. I don't really know what that means. But people say these things all the time. Well, that's just table stakes. So I imagined a room with like they're serving steaks. And I'm like, what is that, a good steak? Is it a bad steak? I mean, I have played poker, but I don't. So even down to that granularity, and I know that that's said a lot in the United States, but then when we talk about international teams and we're trying to really understand meaning, we got to get granular. So when we do that study of that 10-year exercise, and then we bring that down into our day-to-day lived values, we can start attracting and building the culture and investing in the culture that we need right now to get there.
I love it. I have an ask of everyone in the audience. If you've been participating and you've been listening in, I'm a data guy and I love to see data. I'd like you to do me a favor. Start thinking about this. And I'd like you to type this in the comments as soon as you're comfortable. Give me a sense of how effective this hour was for you. 10 is fantastic. 1 is I could have been sleeping and gotten more out of it. There's no right or wrong answer here. But I'd love to hear if you feel like this was an effective use of your time and the conversation helped you a lot. I would give that a 10. If it's not so much, your pillow makes better conversation, give us a 1. I'd love to hear what everyone says. There's no right or wrong answer. I'd love to hear what you think. Nadej, I haven't come to you yet. Give me your distillation.
Oh gosh, that's going to be difficult after the distillation of my 2 co-panelists of Lindsay and Neha. Wow. I think to me, I would distill that a word that came several times and that really stuck in my mind was alignment. And so I think probably the consistency comes with this alignment, which, if I can say, is a kind of a bit the theoretical way of the laser focus. So that's alignment on the direction of the company, the strategy, alignment on the culture, on the goals, and all that kind of thing. So basically, we're all in it together to go towards that. But then the other part that to me really came to mind is, you need that alignment, but then you have to take into account that diversity of people, that beam. And so basically you've got that alignment of meaning. We talked about meaning, it came back several times, but then to be consistent, you have to understand your people, who they are, where they come from, what motivates them, what they're supposed to be doing also in the company. That will be important. And then to tailor the communication to that person, but always in a way that the communication is at the end aligned to whatever the goals, the expectation, the culture. And so that, I think that would be my distillation.
Thank you for that. Well, first of all, thank you to all the audience who participated. Matthew, I see you have a question. I'll send you a response afterwards with maybe a couple of thoughts. Hopefully that might help. But Lindsay, Nadej, Neha, thank you for taking some time to spend some time with us and kind of give us your thoughts and perspectives and expertise and experience. I do want to say to anybody, if you did enjoy those graphs and you do want to be able to see where your company is, feel free, please type in visualization or graph in the comments, and I'll get my team in touch with you so they can build them for you. For if you've got 50 people in your company, we'll build that for you. There's no cost to that, but you can start to see where that alignment or lack of alignment is in a graphical format. We'll do that for you. And finally, please give us, and as James has done here, he has given us a 10. Thank you very much for that, James. I'd love to hear from everyone else if you thought this was a very valuable and effective use of your time. With that said, thank you everyone for joining us today and making this a successful episode.
Thank you.
Thank you.